Well, good afternoon, everyone. Great to have you all back again for our final third session. Fortunate today that we're joined by the MB team, and it's time for us to get started. Just wanted to reiterate our objective from the 3 webinar series was really to take you through the step of developing your own disclosure documents. Today is our third session, and we'll cover off finalising and presenting your BPIR disclosure document online. And we'll also cover off any final questions that you may have. Now, just remember, we're using our chat function here today, so we won't be taking verbal questions, but certainly if you've got anything that you'd like to be addressed in today's session, please put that into the chat line and we'll get into that at various parts of the presentation today. So in terms of our agenda, we're going to go over the key parts of last week's session. And today we're actually going to cover off the requirement for publishing contact details, particularly those manufacturing details if we're importing products. We'll cover off the requirements for issues around warnings and bans. We'll actually talk about maintenance and warranty details as we finalise the disclosure document, and John Allen will take us through how we do that on the BPIR Ready tool. Thanks to all of you who have been using that over the last couple of weeks and given us some great feedback as well. We'll then cover off how your disclosure document should be presented online. In particular, how you should expect your resellers or merchants to be linking to that document so they can meet their requirements. Have a quick discussion around how often it needs to be maintained, and then we will cover off any final questions. And one that's been mentioned a bit is, I'm not sure if our product offering is included or excluded. Can I please get some more assistance with regards to that? So that's our structure for today. All right, in terms of what we learnt last week, John Gardner took us through the stepping stones for developing a body of proof in relation to the performance clauses in the New Zealand Building Code, New Zealand standards. One of the key points there was we need to ensure that we've got a good quality detailed scope of use, because that'll actually help refine our statements around building code performance. He also talked about ensuring that where required, we should also have our conditions, because they will determine the limitations of where the product is designed to be used, and in many cases could actually have some protection for you as a supplier, making it obvious around again, whether it can be used in a commercial or just a residential aspect, whether it can be used indoors or outdoors, but also some other key items needs to be used in conjunction with our design manual or installation guide. Just want to reiterate, within the regulations, the disclosure document does not have to have a prescribed document name or structure. In fact, many of you have contacted us this week and said, hey, we've got a product technical statement which we've updated with, and we believe it's got all the requirements. Would this suffice? Or a product data sheet was another example that we saw this week. So again, just wanted to reiterate that point. Best practice here really is to have one source of truth. So having that document published online on your website or on another publicly available site like EBOSS, and ensuring that everyone else can link to that. So we think that really is the best approach, rather than having multiple versions of this document available. As we will discuss, they will need to be updated. You were taken through how to develop these sections within the BPIR Ready tool. John Allen talked us through how to develop our own scope of use, linking to performance clauses, particularly those of you who have got categories already set up in the tool. The importance of providing evidence against those claims and linking to supporting documentation. think we referenced a design manual as well as a warranty guide in John's example last week. So that was our session last week, and now on to session 3. So really looking at finalising, presenting and maintaining your disclosure document. Now, I'd like to welcome Lisa and Connor back. Thank you for your time today, Lisa and Connor. And today we'll look at these particular items. And Lisa, let's start with the contact details. So would you like to just give us a little bit of background and sort of a clear understanding of what the minimum requirements are under the regs, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Look, Dom, quickly I just messaged you. Andrew Vere-Jones is having issues with his being stuck on mute. Are you able just to check that for him, please? That would be great.
And
yeah,
the co-host, we'll promote you.
Okay. Right, let's get started. Okay, so disclosure, we are importing building products from overseas. As you probably all know, there's a requirement in there about disclosing some information about your overseas manufacturer. So for a product manufactured overseas, it's the legal and trading name of the overseas manufacturer or manufacturers and the address for service of the overseas manufacturer or manufacturers. The rest of the information that's in the regulations is only required to be disclosed if it actually exists. So if there is an address of a public internet site, then you're required to disclose it. If there's a public email address, you're required to disclose that. And if they have an NZBN number, you're also required to disclose that. So these requirements are mandatory, and they're also enforceable under the regulations. So just to give a little bit of background on why why the regulations have been enacted like this. But the overall intention of the regulation is to support users and decision makers to make informed decisions about building products and to help to support them to choose products that are fit for purpose or fit for their purpose. So overall, it's the intention to have transparency over the whole building product supply chain.
Lisa, I just wonder, we had quite a few questions coming through here. Can there's a number of questions we received during the week, and I just wondered if we could actually touch on one of those, and maybe between yourself and Connor, we could actually sort of give some more detail. So let me just read this out. I did notice there was a few issues around audio. So can I just get a thumbs up from someone they can actually hear me okay? Great, thank you. All right. So the question is, we work with a major retail group to bring in product under a private label program for them. The product uses their branding as currently not on our website, and all of the compliance documentation is available through that retailer. Under these new changes, who would have to publicly display the BPIR disclosure document and who would be identified on it? The retailer, us as the importer, and or the manufacturer. In this case, the product comes from Thailand.
Yes, I can probably take this one. So yeah, I guess the key thing from the outset is that that information needs to be disclosed at some point before the product's sold. So the question around who discloses it, as per the regs, it's either the manufacturer or the importer. So in this case, likely the importer of the product. The regulations, we can't enforce them to on overseas manufacturers. So it would be, in this case, probably the importer of that product. The importer might need to go to the manufacturer to get some of the information to disclose, if that's not already available, some of the details. And so yeah, I guess it's a conversation with your suppliers as well to sort of confirm that around who's responsible. That information could be disclosed on, it has to be available online, so it could be on the importer's website if they've got one, on the manufacturer's website, or if the retailer wants to host that information, that's also fine, or on EBOSS's website, for example. But I guess the important point is you can't contract out of your responsibilities. So the information might be hosted on your retailer's website, but as the manufacturer or the importer, in probably this case, you're the one with those responsibilities. So we've sort of come across a couple of different scenarios like this. Really good questions. There's lots of different relationships people have. So within MB, we're going to look to put together some of these scenarios and frame them up and post them out externally so people can kind of identify with and connect with some of them, and hopefully clarify some things.
Great, thanks, Connor. Yeah, I think just providing some further guidance here would be really useful just from the feedback that we are seeing. So in this particular case, we would have the retailer, which would need to ensure that the documents were available, and they would have to disclose who the importer was and the origin of where the product comes from. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, so the retailer just has to make sure the information's available. It would be, they can do that in a number of ways. It's the importer of that product. That would have to identify, who that manufacturer is. So Lisa touched on that earlier.
Okay. I see we've got a number of questions coming through, which we might jump to shortly. We had another couple of questions here. Lisa, can we answer this one around the NZBN number? So they asked whether it was if it was on their website, if that was sufficient, if they have, in this case, have said they have thousands of products. Is that a mandatory requirement to have that on each disclosure statement?
That's a good question. I mean, Connor, I don't know what you think about that. I mean, it's got to be clearly linked to the product information. So if someone is using the product information, they need to be able to clearly know that there is an NZBN number. And if that relationship becomes unclear, it's possible that it doesn't meet requirements. So again, it's about coming back to the intention of the regulations, that you're making this information clear and accessible to users of your products. And if you're doing that, then that's great. But if it's getting to the point where perhaps you're not, then you might need to have a bit more of a think about it.
Okay.
Thoughts, Connor, on that?
Yeah, no, nothing really further to add. It does come back to the intention behind the purpose behind the regulations. It's not something we've discussed before, but I think as long as a customer can make a clear link and find, the NZBN number, if it's applicable, then that should be fine.
Thank you. And then finally, this actually came from a merchant for products that do not have a URL on the packaging. I suppose some guidance around communication in store. So they're asking whether is signage at point of sale sufficient, or does the signage need to be in the bay where the product is actually located?
Yeah, so this is kind of where the regs open it up a little bit. So it could be on the product itself or on a label, and it again comes back to the purpose behind the regs. So let's say, for example, you wanted to be able to compare two products. You're in store, and there were two similar products, and you wanted to understand a bit more about them, what information is available. As long as the customer can make that comparison, it should be fine. It's kind of hard to do a case-by-case example, but yeah, as long as the customer can find that information and compare the two, really.
Yes. Okay. All right, Connor, thank you for that. Lisa, should we just there's plenty of questions that we've got here around the contact details, but can we just get through the warnings and bans next, and then we can come back to address all these questions shortly.
Of course. Okay, so as you'll also be aware, one of the required pieces of information on your disclosure is if the building product is subject to a warning or a ban under Section 26 of the Building Act. And if so, providing a description of that warning or ban. As most of you are probably aware, MBIE's only issued one warning and one ban at this point in time. The ban relates to installation and or repair of foil insulation in residential buildings with an existing electrical installation. And we only have one warning that we've issued around the loop bar. It's called the loop bar warning, and it relates to a building method. And it's a warning on the use of the loop bar details and flange hung double T precast concrete flooring units. So what I will do, obviously MBIE has the power under Section 26 of the Building Act to issue other warnings and bans in the future where the requirements of Section 26 and other sections in the Building Act are met. So what I will do is actually paste the link in the chat to our warnings and bans page on our website, but it's probably worth just mentioning at this point too, if you haven't already, it's another good reason to subscribe to our website. So where there's any updates or changes in the building system as a whole, that you're staying on top of that. So I will paste those links into there now.
Great, thanks, thanks, Lisa. Right. Yep. Thanks. Keep your questions coming through there. Should we now just move on to warranties and maintenance? I've actually got a question that has come through, just stating sort of the level of detail that is required. How extensive do the installation maintenance requirements need to be? So if you can just sort of answer the, I suppose the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here.
So is that maintaining the your information online, is it?
No, it's around linking to maintenance and installation information.
So this absolutely you may, and it's quite common, I think, for suppliers and manufacturers of building products to already have an installation guide and potentially also a maintenance guide, maybe already on their website. So it is absolutely appropriate that you can provide a link in your product information disclosure out to your installation guide, for example, or also your maintenance information if you've got it. Again, keeping in mind that we are trying to, if you think about the intention of the regulations, that you're trying to support people to access your product information as easily as possible in order to support their decision making. So yeah, I think it's just a judgment call on your part, but absolutely, if you do want to link out, you can do that. Yep.
So just to be clear, Lisa, there is a sort of expectation that maintenance and warranty information will be linked in the documents?
Well, I guess it depends what you've got. I mean, I think the regulations say any installation or maintenance information. So what you've got there, yes, you can do that. Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to say? I think you had some comments you wanted to make.
Certainly for installation, one of the things that may be important to many products is that the person who's designing the building needs to know how the product fits with the various other parts of the building that are adjacent and near to it. Yes. So does it need fixings? What are they going? Yeah, the designer will be thinking about what are they going into. There's some compatibility issues. Are the loads being transferred to where the designer expects them to go to? You know, obviously not all these things apply to all products, but the important thing about the installation instructions is to actually understand how the product works with all the rest of the building, so that a designer can be confident the entire building complies with the building code. Plus, if a third part, so unless the supplier is also the installer, there also has to be enough information that the builder or whoever puts the product in actually knows what to do, because if it's not installed properly, obviously all the claims you make about building code performance may not be achieved because it's not used properly. And similarly for the maintenance, if you're saying it's going to have a durability of a certain number of years, or that is based on it being properly maintained. If someone can't see what being properly maintained involves, they don't know whether that's necessarily the right product for the situation. So having enough information accessible to the purchaser or the person making the decision on specifying the product is sort of the intention of requiring that information.
And Andrew, I just wanted to clarify, this is appropriate for both Class 1 and Class 2 products?
That is right, because Class 2 customized.
As an example, some residential windows, there would be an expectation that there would be links to installation and maintenance details.
That's right, because actually it's all very well to provide a window that's, say, perfectly weathertight. If you don't actually know how to flash it into the rest of the cladding and make the perimeter of it weathertight against the weatherboards or bricks or whatever they are,
Yep.
it's still not going to achieve its purpose.
Yes, and there's a question here, installation methods can become very lengthy. So what we're suggesting here is that it's fine for people to just link to a more detailed installation guide, as opposed to trying to summarize it within the BPIR disclosure document.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just trying to look at some of these other questions here. Lisa, a lot of these actually kind of question the purpose of the contact details. A lot of comments around disclosing sensitive or confidential information, and a lot of questions around why this is included. I suppose now it's in regulations. This is not up for debate or whether it should or shouldn't be included. It is. And I suppose what we want to be clear about today is what are the minimum requirements if people do feel some commercial sensitivity. What are the minimum requirements what are the minimum requirements? And I think any guidance here that you can provide, and Connie talked to around stepping through some scenarios, I think would be really useful, because I can see lots of questions and need for clarification here.
I mean, the regulations are clear, as I ran through them before, about what is required to be disclosed. But I suppose it's about really understanding that clearly in your mind about what that is. And there isn't any requirement to go over and above that. So just being very clear in your mind what the regulations are asking for, and then anything over and above that is not required to be disclosed.
Yes, I think what I'm seeing here is that there's some sensitivity to the supply chain, and that in some cases there might be quite open supply agreements with international manufacturers that have not been disclosed to date, and meeting these requirements would in fact disclose those details. So through that level of transparency, it's something they haven't actually, a lot of product suppliers have not had to deal with before, and potentially are not in place to disclose that because they don't actually have the right contractual agreements in place because they haven't needed those before.
Yeah, I've just see questions around sort of what sort of consultation took place. So this isn't something that sprung up in the past 6 months. It's been a few years coming. So in 2021, the Building Amendment Act gave powers to create these regulations. And sort of partway through 2021, there was a public consultation on these regulations and what was going to be in them. So it's been a couple of years coming, and they've been made about a year ago. Got just under 6 months left. So yeah, there has been a consultation process that's been followed.
Just some other questions here. If we import a specific product for a specific project, one that is different from our normal range, is a BPIR document required?
Shall I speak to this one? I think it's useful to look at the part of the regulation that talks about the product being available for wholesale or retail supply. It might be supply or wholesale or retail trade, some words to that effect. So if it's passed on to one and only one client for use in one specific building, it may not meet that requirement of wholesale or retail. So I would be thinking about that when trying to make that decision.
So again, we did cover that in the first session. I think we might have looked at a customized kitchen bench top, and if that is specific for a particular project, then the expectation is that a document was not required, if that is a project-specific design.
Certainly, if the product is being made and it's not going to be made in that product's not going to be made again for anyone else, then it's not being offered for sale and it's not required to have a disclosure.
Okay, let's keep your questions coming through here. I know there's lots of statements here. We'll just try and bring these to light. We will have some time at the end of today's session. John Allen, if I can bring you in now, we have, let's look at how we can finalize the disclosure documents using the BPIR tool. So if you just want to take us through the final steps for doing that.
Yeah, happily, Matt. Let me just load up. Okay. Look, last week we went through the BPIR Ready tool in terms of adding those major written sections of disclosure information with the fictional example I had loaded up. And today I'm just going to breeze through and finish off that summary through these final steps, which you just heard covered off before. So I'm going to edit my Hercules Cedarboard, one that we're working on. And we're on the question of the hour, the contact details. So I'm going to load that up for my product, which is manufactured in New Zealand. So I'll choose the Aotearoa New Zealand option, and I'm going to throw in my trading name, address here. Website. Email, phone, and the NZBN. Moving on, I'm answering no, my product is not subject to a warning or ban. And that takes me to the version step, where you can use this internally if you want, or it can be a version numbering system that you'd use externally in your final disclosure information. I'm just going to pop a version 1 on mine here. Now that takes us to the review step, which is an opportunity just to read through that written information and just make sure everything is as you expect. If you want to change anything, there's this edit button, which gives you a quick link to head back to that step and edit there. I'm happy with everything, so I'm going to submit. And then we're at the end, which I just want to show you a few things here again on this final summary page. So this is our finished self-assessed summary with BPIR ready. And remember, this is really an internal summary for your team to use and purpose for your final publishing as you desire. And also a reminder that at the bottom of the document, or summary, I should say, we have this appendix, and we've included the full performance clauses. So this is not essential for you to include to the end users of your disclosure information. It's really here because we think it's useful information for you and members of your team you might share this with to understand exactly what all the clauses are referring to. So look, from here, your options with the summary, you can share the summary with your colleagues, your graphic design team, your web team, whoever's appropriate. We've got a little quick copy link here. You can paste that in your email. And just a reminder that they won't have the ability to edit this. I can only see this edit button here because I'm logged in and it's mine. You can also copy the text here to a document just by simply highlighting and selecting. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to throw mine in a Google Doc. Of course, you could be using Word, InDesign, many options. And that's come through, and it's actually taken with it some of the formatting up here as well. So you can, it's using these preset styles that are coming through. So if you want to adjust those styles, you can more efficiently sort of batch format that. If you plain text, we have this right at the very bottom of the document, we have this copy to clipboard button here. That just copies everything, but as plain text, so it strips out all the formatting that's on the page. Cool. And lastly, just at the top here, from Monday, we will have the option to download a PDF version, which will look pretty similar to this this web page here. Just trying to provide a different different format if you want to access that offline, or you want to share that with colleagues and they might want to annotate that PDF and come back to you for tweaking. So that's the end. We've managed to come through a load of summary. Hope it's of value to you, and I'll throw it back to Matt.
Great. Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate you just signing that off. And a few extra steps for you just to complete your document over the next week, and then you should be ready to now scale that across all of your other products in your portfolio. All right, again, lots of questions here, which we will get to. Lisa, we just want to cover off now, presenting the document online, some best practice around how merchants or resellers are expected to link or deal with that document, and talking about maintaining that disclosure document, so keeping that up to date. So if we could kind of get through those three sections, and then we'll get back to questions.
Of course. Okay. So just talking about maintaining your documents online, but there is some good information on page 19 of our guidance. But basically, as a manufacturer or importer, you're responsible for keeping that information up to date. So that could include updating that information to address changes to regulations, building code, or compliance pathways. And you need to make sure the information remains accessible for previous versions of a product that is still available for supply. So you need to make sure that your information clearly shows which piece of information or which disclosure document belongs to which version of that product, where you've got more than one. Where the product is taken off the market or it's superseded by another product, you'll need to decide how you're best to deal with this. We don't have a set time limit in the regulations for how long you should have that information archived, but we do recommend archiving it for a period of at least 10 years, which aligns with the implied warranties outlined in the Building Act. And if your products are being sold by a retailer or distributor, ensure you inform them if there are any changes that are going to be made, including that website address where that you've supplied to the retailer or distributor. If there's any changes to that, you need to make sure that the retailer or distributor knows about that. And I'll just quickly go over the other bits about presenting online again. It must be published and maintained on a website which is free of charge. So you can't obviously charge for the information or ask people to supply an email address or anything like that. And I mean, if we go back to the intentions of the regulations are to have people be supported in their decision making about building products. So, I mean, always be keeping that in mind when you're thinking about how you're publishing that information. There's a note there in our guidance that if you don't have a website or you choose not to publish the information on your website, you can use a third-party provider to host that information, provided you've met all the other requirements. But you're still responsible, back to that same first principle, for producing and collating that product information and keeping it up to date. And Connor, did you have anything else you wanted to add around the trade merchant side of things?
No, nothing to add on that. No.
Just on that, so the expectation would be that the merchant would be able to direct a customer, let's say in the store, through to the website of the supplier where they would access the document.
Yes.
And so that's up to the merchant to determine the link they'll get from their supplier. And that may well be a link directly to the document or to their website, as long as the website has navigation for the consumer to be able to find that document within the supplier's website.
Yeah, and I think keeping in mind that, making it easy, not hard for people to find that information.
Yes.
I mean, it's in your best interests to, you know, make sure that information is easily available and easy to use.
And Lisa, so just on the keeping the document up to date, there's no requirement to update it annually. It's just as things change.
Yes, yeah, and you're the one that knows the product better than anybody. So, you know, alongside those responsibilities to create and publish that information is making sure where anything changes that you're engaging with that disclosure and ensuring there's nothing that needs to be updated there. But you don't have to be auditing it on a super regular basis. It's not a rigid thing.
Okay. Andrew, Connor, Lisa, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Otherwise, we can, we've got about 20 minutes and we've got quite a few questions here. We can just start to work our way through.
I've seen some questions about the consultation process. So there's information available online around what that process looked like, but I guess just running through it at a high level. So an amendment was made to the Building Act in early 2021, which essentially allowed for the regulations to be made in some form. It didn't prescribe what it was going to look like or what information necessarily, but that, you know, allowed for the regulations to be made. From there, MB put together a discussion document, and that was, you know, consulted on in April 2021. And that outlined the proposal for what would be covered in the regulations. And then in August that same year, MB posted up a submission, a summary of the submissions received. So all that's available online. I can share that. And then over the, I guess, next 6 to 8 months following that, the regulations were drafted based on the discussion document and the summary of submissions. So that MB has to follow quite a strict process when any regulations are made. So they've been consulted on for a couple of years. I guess sort of seeing that some people weren't aware of that process. But yeah, we do our best to get it out there to people because we do want to seek feedback as early as possible on any regulations that are drafted.
Okay, thanks, Connor. All right, we'll let's get into these. Let's get into these questions here. We have got a question from Rob. A product is available with a BPIR available on the website. When it is superseded, I assume the product, it will be removed from the website because a supplier does not want people to specify it. His question is around the archiving of the BPIR document. So really some guidance around if a product is superseded, how long does the BPIR document need to stay live? And if so, for how long? What's the guidance there?
Yeah, so the regs don't prescribe this. There's no set timeframes. In our guidance, we've recommended a 10-year period, which aligns with the warranties in the Building Act. So although the product might not be, be sold by the retailer anymore, there might be a backlog in stores. People might just not have installed it. So I guess thinking from an end user, a customer point of view, it would be good if they had that installation information and all the other information there, the maintenance stuff, when it comes to using that product. It might not have changed drastically, but our recommendation is that it's kept up for a few years, but ultimately at the discretion of the manufacturer or the importer.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Question from Larry. I'll be worried about the amount of importing suppliers that aren't with us today and unaware of what they're facing. Lisa, did you want to just sort of touch on, your program of communications and education over the next few months?
I might actually give that to Connor because it fits more into his team than
Sorry,
it does.
say that one again. What was that?
Connor, was just comment around people who aren't with us today. How are they going to find out about this? So what have you got planned in terms of education and awareness?
So we've got an information and education person on the project, and we are launching an awareness campaign around this. So, we've engaged a marketing essentially agency to support us with this, to help get the word out there about the regulations. We're attending a number of conferences. So we're at Build NZ the other month. It was really good. Talked to heaps and heaps of people about the regulations. Some were aware of it, some weren't. I guess what we, communicating with them is a lot of the time, manufacturers already have this information. It's just about, sort of going through and checking whether there are any gaps. So it might be in a product technical statement or on the website that's already there. So that based on the research we did during the regulations, the feedback has been that most manufacturers will have this information, and it's probably best practice to have already had this anyway. But yeah, we do need to do some work around promoting the regulations, getting it out there, making sure people are informed about what their responsibilities are. So we're looking to, be at EBOSS in their conference sort of later this year. And on a number of other expos. But if you guys have any other ideas about how we can, get the word out there about the regulations, we're really keen to hear back from you guys. As people in the industry, you'll know best how to engage with your colleagues.
Lisa, we've got a question here from Robert. We manufacture and supply a range of replacement washers supplied to the plumbing industry for taps, etc. Do these need to have a BPIR? Do you want to just again offer some guidance around people who are unconfident or just are not quite sure how to approach this issue, whether they do comply or are excluded from these regulations?
Andrew, is that one you could talk to?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, while it's up to each supplier or importer or manufacturer to determine for themselves what their product, whether it meets the description of a class 1 or a class 2 product or neither. In this case, just reading from the description for class 1, is it mass produced or produced in batches to a general specification? Is it available for wholesale or retail purchase? Is it new and not used? If, when it's used in building work, does it affect whether the building work complies with the building code? And is it not a product of a kind described in Regulation 7, which is a bunch of odd things that are exempted from requirements? My first thought was the washer seems to meet that description. Mass produced, probably available for wholesale or retail, probably new, probably affects whether, I don't know, sinks overflow or something, but if it works properly or not, which is a building code requirement. The Regulation 7 stuff is products that are code marked or modular components or a temporary product, frames and trusses, gas appliances, electrical appliances. Doesn't seem to be any of them.
So Andrew, just listening to you there, I mean, this has been quite a specific product category, and it's required you to interpret the building and code requirements. So again, what I know we've got the guidance documents which were referred to in the last session. Is there any other information that you'd like to give people who are still unclear as to whether or not they do fit within? I don't want to repeat what we've already covered in session 1, but just if there were any further thoughts about assistance for suppliers, be good to know that now, or whether if there's further assistance coming down the line, just another opportunity to just cover that off.
So the regulations themselves, as with all regulations, are available from the New Zealand legislation website, but there's a link in the guidance document to them as well, which is probably easier to find. But if the person supplying a product, or certainly the person manufacturing it or importing it, doesn't understand it, then who is likely to? Surely they're the person who understands the product best and is best placed to look at what it's used for, what it's suitable for. It's not the ministry's job, and we wouldn't have the resources to identify every type of product in the country and how it contributes to building code compliance. I mean, products keep cropping up that we're not aware of until somebody some issue arises. By and large, product suppliers do understand what their products are and how they're used. Sometimes all this information is actually somewhere they've already got, and they just need to work their way through it.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Andrew. I'm just trying to looking at a number of these questions here. They're really trying to get some clarification around the process, which Connor you've addressed, and feel like there seems to be if people are really wanting to kind of question this or take this up with MB, is there any advice we can give to some of these suppliers who are looking at trying to provide further clarification or the potential for these regs to be adjusted? Have you got any comments around that, team?
I mean, the regs have been made, and it's quite a process to get them amended, going through Minister and Cabinet and getting their approval. And I think with an election this year, it's pretty unlikely to happen, but we want to make sure these are workable for people. And so I've seen quite a few comments around needing to provide some more rationale behind why the manufacturer or the importer details need to be, well, the manufacturer details need to be disclosed. So I think we probably need to put out a bit more of a formal sort of statement from MB that we can communicate. Probably via EBOSS would be a good channel. Yeah, so we can sort of clearly articulate that to everyone. So yeah, we've covered it, but still getting questions. So definitely need to go into a bit more detail there.
Yeah, well, look,
Yeah.
I'll make sure these questions are downloaded and we can then have those summarised and passed through, Lisa and Connor, to your team.
Yeah,
to be able to facilitate that internally.
definitely.
All right, we've got 8 or so minutes here. Question regarding tapware. We have multiple ranges. Are we to do one BPIR for each product? It's rather confusing and frustrating. Also, all the examples we see are for building products, but nothing on plumbing.
So you can group products, definitely. If there's a line of products and they're all very similar, maybe just with slight differences that don't have any sort of impact on, how it contributes to building code compliance, then definitely, there can be one beeper for those. So there's some guidance in our documentation around that. So yeah, we're possible, because I know, some of you guys will have hundreds of different products, which might all be, slightly different. So where you can, I think it's probably wise to try group them, but just thinking about, interactions with the building code.
Yep.
Yep.
A couple of questions with regards to roofing. There is there's guidance to roof profiled metal roofing, but roofs are actually customized for each project. They're specific in terms of color, length, substrate material. So does that make the roofing products a class 1 or class 2?
Well, it is up to the manufacturer importer to make that decision. I would look at class 2 pretty closely. Class 2 regulations are based on a line of products where each unit is customized to the specification of an individual client. Is new, when used in building work, may affect whether it complies with the building code, and is not a product of a type described in Regulation 7.
Yeah, so that would likely be class 2 unless it's a fully bespoke, customized roofing product, which in that case would be exempt, but likely class 2. Yeah.
A question here in the regulations clause 3 is interpretation. Responsible person is described and their specific responsibilities are listed. Do we need to publicly list the responsible person's details, or is this an internal organizational thing?
So the way the regs are structured is that each responsible person has different specified responsibilities. So it's broken up into 2 groups. So it'll be the manufacturer or the importer as one responsible person, and then the retailer, wholesaler, or distributor is that other group. So as, say, the importer, the manufacturer's details would need to be disclosed there. So that's covered in the regulations. We can provide some more guidance around the rationale why, as well, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
question in terms of contact details. We're manufacturing locations around the country. Should we be just stating our head office address, or do we need to go into more detail?
That's not a question I've heard before. So that maybe need to get back to you, but I think probably a head office thing makes more sense rather than 5 different sites throughout the country. But it hasn't been something that we've talked through that I'm aware of.
Yep,
it's a good question.
We're a manufacturer of hot water cylinders. Is this class as an electrical appliance, and so exempt from the BPIR disclosure document?
So gas and the gas ones are exempt, and electrical. So I guess it would depend on the specific product. And originally those types of products were included in the regulations, but based on submissions, they were removed. Yeah.
Right. Quite a few questions around sort of enforcement. So maybe a few people didn't attend our session 1. So Lisa, do you just want to talk about your sort of what you're building up to in terms of and what will be in place for the 11th of December?
Yes. So what we're looking at, as you might well be aware, there are a number of offences and penalties in relation to these new requirements. So MBIE will have the ability to issue a notice to take corrective action in relation to the requirements, and that is also not complying with that is an offence. And then there are a couple of infringement offences as well. And then there's also a prosecution offence as well. I think it's worth also, for those who weren't here in the first session, there's another offence in the Building Act that commenced on the 7th of September last year, and that relates to false, misleading and unsubstantiated claims about building products. That in the past, before that section commenced, where we received complaints and that were claiming to be false or misleading statements, we would have sent it to the Commerce Commission and they would have investigated that under the Fair Trading Act. So now that jurisdiction has come over to MBIE in relation to building products. So that will sit in tandem with the new powers under the Building Act in relation to the building product information requirements. Now, our team, the team that I'm in, is actually an operational team, and we are responsible for the compliance and enforcement with these new regulations. So we have a team that contains investigators. We actually have an investigations team as part of our team. So they'll be responsible for looking at complaints that come in, and we will be both receiving complaints going forward, but also monitoring the market as well. So it won't be just a reactive type of approach. It will be both reactive to complaints that we receive, but also proactively monitoring at the same time.
Yes. A comment here just stating that although the December is a time frame, merchants are actually asking for documents to be in place by the end of August or September, someone is saying here. So, there's some urgency around that further guidance. So I suppose that emphasis there on timeliness for that would be appreciated. Connor, you mentioned that further guidance will be required. Do you have any idea of what timing that would take? Is that in the next few weeks? Is there any idea on how long that would take to put together?
Well, I think in the first instance, really implore people to look at the guidance that's there available at the moment. Some of the questions that we're receiving are covered there already. I know it's another thing to do on top of an already pretty busy work schedule, I'm sure. But yeah, really implore you guys to have a look at that guidance. we're coming up with a checklist for people. So if they have information available already online about their products, they can use that to go through and check where the gaps are, sort of do a self-assessment. I think once people get their heads around, the regulations and what's involved, and work through it for a couple of products, it'll get easier. It's just sort of taking that first step with people. Not to say you guys haven't done that. I think attending these webinars with EBOSS will have been a massive help for you guys. So really appreciate that, EBOSS. Yeah, so we've got that checklist coming out, as I mentioned, an awareness campaign. Yeah, and I think there's definitely going to be a need for us to work through some of the different scenarios and relationships people have, with importers, manufacturers, distributors, and who needs to be doing what. There's some quite unique ones there, but
yes,
yep.
Thanks, Connor. And I think in that guidance, there's some great information here, some clarity around, the requirements to disclose the actual manufacturer's details as opposed to the country of manufacture or sourcing or origin. That seems to be coming up time and time again.
Yeah.
And it's the role of the importer as opposed to the manufacturer, particularly in terms of, if we think about the commercial contracts, making sure that it's appropriate who is actually registered on that statement.
Yeah.
I know we're just over 2 o'clock, and for a lot of you, you'll need to disappear. So I just want to summarize again. Thanks very much to Andrew, Connor, and Lisa for attending today and getting to a lot of these questions. In terms of the next steps, obviously the BPIR Ready tool is available for everyone to use free of charge. As John mentioned, the PDF download will be available as of next week. Obviously, there's templates available on the MBIE website with the guidance. Keep an eye on upcoming guidance from MBIE from what we've heard today, and further information that will be distributed across the wider industry. Keep in touch with your merchants. Some of them have got deadlines looming, as been suggested in the chat function. And just on that, as I mentioned, we'll be summarising that and distributing that for the MBIE team to take all of your comments on board from today's session. Connor, Lisa, was there any other questions here that have come up in the chat that you wanted to address before we close?
I don't think so for me at the moment. I think it'll be really good if we can just take these away, and then, because for some of these things, they are potentially things we haven't come across before, and it's important for us to spend some time just to have a think about it before we respond. So
Yep.
We would be delighted if we could do that.
Yes.
So you're probably not at the moment. I think it's probably good just to remind everyone at this point, we can't give specific advice on specific products. So I do want to reiterate that onus is on manufacturers and importers to take responsibility for those judgments themselves. But yes, we'd like some time also to consider those questions.
Yes, and for those of you who are looking for some support on the BPIR Ready website, we have some consultants. I see that Louise and Nick have also been providing some commentary in the chat, which is great. So please reach out to them, as well as John Gardner, who was on the session last week. And also we'll make sure that we keep people updated as well. So look, I appreciate everyone's attendance today, and certainly your comments through on the chat line. Thank you for that. That's the conclusion of our series on BPIR, and look forward to seeing your documents coming together. And also I'm sure there'll be further debate around how we address some of the issues here, and look forward to further clarification from the wider MBIE team. So thanks again for Lisa, Connor, and Andrew. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Many thanks.
Bye.